Good morning and welcome to Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. What a show I have for you. We usually start with the headlines, and today we're doing exactly that, but we're going to have a special guest, Josh Holland of the podcast We've Got Issues. You've seen his writing in The Nation and Alternate all over the place. He's going to be joining me to do a rundown of the Build Back Better debacle. Mitch McConnell scurrying back into his lair after Biden says we might weaken the filibuster to raise that debt ceiling. The Donziger follow-up, Texas abortion, court packing, so much to talk with Josh about. And then the second half of the show, Heidi Sieck, co-founder of Vote Pro-Choice, is coming on to talk about that 6-week abortion ban in Texas and the federal block that just happened this week. All very exciting. Stay with us. Coming up right up here at the top, headlines. Okay, I could not be happier to have you with me today, Josh. Josh Holland of We've Got Issues. It's been over a month since I've seen you on this show.
Long.
To have you on the show a lot. I'm just so happy to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me, Julianna, and congrats on the new show. I like the cool graphics.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah,
and
high production values. Yeah,
those, but well, I did tell them what I liked.
Yeah, all right, good job,
Josh. I do want to say it's one of our kind of yearly anniversaries. Netroots Nation is happening right now, although we're both not there.
Yeah, it's not the same virtual. You don't have the opportunities to have drinks together.
No, or to push in on each other's space and media row. And
steal each other's
grab
equipment.
Each other's guests, all that.
Yeah, that was fun. Maybe next year, huh? I was hoping there would be this year.
I was too. I said definitely gonna go, but hey,
didn't happen.
Can't do everything.
Yeah, it's gonna be a 36-month pandemic, according to one expert.
And what month are we in?
22, something like that. No, 21.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's becoming the unvaxxed pandemic. So
right. So
those of us who are believe in science will have a lower burden.
All right. We were just, we have a new producer on today. Giancarlo's in the background. I am going to blame him for everything that goes wrong, even if I flub my own words.
Yes, you should,
that seems good.
But he's also responsible for any mistakes I make. Just throwing that out there.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, poor Giancarlo.
Okay, we weren't going to talk about this, but you kind of brought it up, and I have an interest in your thoughts. The new pill that's coming out that they announced, it's not out yet.
Yes,
that cuts,
therapeutic.
Yeah, that cuts your
it's the
rate of hospitalization death by 50, I think. What do you think that's going to do to the debate around vax, anti-vax?
Well,
what do you think they're going to say?
I think we have to find out if Donald Trump is for it or against it, and then we'll know where that's going to go with the debate. I don't know. We should celebrate all measures of public health. We should celebrate everything that decreases deaths. That shouldn't be partisan. It shouldn't be ideological. We should all celebrate miraculous vaccines that cut down hospitalizations and deaths by 95%. But we don't, and that was something that was set early on by the leader of the GOP, and has continued. Right, we're still dealing with the legacy of the very early moves that Donald Trump made to prop up the stock market, basically, and shore up his reelection chances. So I don't know how they're reacting. How are they reacting? Have you seen any Instapundit post or something like that about it?
No, I've avoided it completely.
Look, I don't think that it's a good substitute for vaccination if that's the way they spin it, simply because the vaccination breaks chains of transmission, and when we have a lot of people who are infected, that's how you get new variants. And it's a matter of time, or hopefully it isn't a matter of time, but it could be a matter of time before one comes that is vaccine resistant. So we don't want people getting it in the first place. It's good to have treatments, though, for those who do.
Plus, one of the treatment is supposed to be you have to get it early.
It's early on. Yeah, you have to get it very early on. So you can't be in denial that you have COVID.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Sometimes you don't even know you have it.
We've seen that a lot. Well, also a lot of people who have it and who are ideologically predisposed to believe that it is not a big deal deny having it. We've had certainly like lots of anecdotal stories of doctors in emergency rooms, in ICUs, facing patients who are like, no, I don't have COVID. COVID is a hoax. So if you think you have a cold or the flu and you don't get this new therapeutic early on, it's not going to help you. But I think it's great. And look, it's interesting also just to see how quickly we are, our clinical and scientific communities are able to produce these new medications when you have this historic public health crisis and all the money in the world to play around with new research.
Oh, thank you. I also read this week that they came out finally with the malaria vaccine for malaria, which malaria has been like the scourge plague of Africa and southern. I mean, my family's from southern Italy, and I'm reading a book, Christ Stopped at Eboli. It's a really old book, and it talks about the reason that my family's village is so remote is because the higher up you go in the mountains, the cooler air keeps away the mosquitoes for longer. So basically, my entire heritage from my Italian heritage is trying to escape malaria. It's
good. It's good for the cheese too, though. It ages the cheese well high in the mountains.
The poverty, you don't see it.
You got to think about these things. Yeah, no, malaria is a huge killer that we don't take serious. We have not traditionally taken seriously because it affects people in developing countries, poor countries, and so it's been something that hasn't been seen as a major public health threat, even though it kills, I don't know how many millions of people every year.
Well, we've gone completely off script. I was like, here's some topics.
Yeah, no, totally
here we are.
Which
is why I love having you on.
It's your producer's fault, though.
It is, yeah. I
think we established that.
Okay, so let's go to, we were going to talk about Build Back Better, and we're specifically talking, everyone knows kind of where we are, that the House didn't pass, and now everybody's focused on the dollar amounts involved. Republicans want a number that they can throw in voters' faces later on, et cetera. But Bernie Sanders had he had a complaint that he put out this week that the media is not covering this in any way that is actually useful. They're not talking about the climate investments. They're not, or the mainstream media. I mean, we are, but they're not talking about the care that the elderly and disabled are getting, the path to citizenship for the dreamers, the TPS holders, the farm workers, the child tax credits, the free pre-K, there's just like a lot in there, and everyone's talking about this number, trying to play gotcha. I have a little video, somebody put together on Twitter, this mashup of Bernie historically making the same argument. We'll play it, and then I want to hear your thoughts.
We get sensationalism, we get gossip.
One of the problems that we have is the media.
The media is becoming increasingly gobbled up by multinational corporations.
CBS, NBC, ABC, or the major newspapers in America are owned by big money, and the concentration of that ownership is becoming significantly more severe.
They turn on television, and all that they hear about is the latest scandal or latest kidnapping or latest murder. Why are the needs of the American people not being addressed? Who decided that?
When we talk about big money controlling this country, it's not only the direct political process, but it's how we even learn about what's going on in this country.
There is a huge disconnect. People say, I'm working 50 or 60 hours a week, I'm working at 2 jobs, can't afford child care for my kids, I don't have health care, and I turn on the television and Tom Brokaw is telling me the economy is booming.
The news itself is becoming entertainment.
People do not see their reality reflected on television. Politics is like the Boston Celtics or the New York Yankees. Isn't it interesting? Do you think he's going to win? But it has nothing to do with my life.
The major function of television, by and large, is not to educate people, not to entertain people, but to bombard them every other minute with a 30-second ad selling them one product or the other.
If you are a union worker, you make 30% more than a non-union worker doing exactly the same job. Have you ever seen on television one program which talks about the benefits of unions for workers and for working people in this country?
What we're looking at is these huge corporations swallowing the book publishing firms, the movie houses, the magazines. And who is going to be talking, presenting an independent voice that is free of big money?
In a democratic society, what media has to do is reflect your lives, your pains, your problems, your hopes, and get you involved in the process so you can make this country a better country than it is. That's what media is about.
I love I love Bernie Classic, and I love the fact that he is exactly the same,
Yeah.
except for hairline, that
Yeah.
he has been for 35 years.
Not the only one. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I find most frustrating is that the legacy media gets extremely defensive with these types of criticisms, which are substantive criticisms. What are they focusing on? We've had almost, and this has been the whole so-called debate over the infrastructure bills, the twin infrastructure bills, has been a great example of this. It has been completely free of policy details, of substance. These numbers, 3.5 trillion, 1.5 trillion, these don't mean anything to anybody. Literally $1 trillion. I mean, that's $1,000 billion. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's over 10 years. It's rarely said that it's over 10 years. So it sounds like a much bigger number than it is. The military budget over the next 10 years is going to be like $8 trillion. Just this intense focus on the horse race, on the personalities, on Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and very little coverage to what is being offered in the $3.5 trillion package, and what has to be cut to get it trimmed down to what the so-called moderates are demanding. As you say, it's got what if the mainstream press focused more on the fact that we're offering dental and vision benefits to Medicare beneficiaries, universal pre-K. These things are wildly popular. And when you have Joe Manchin come out and say, oh, I'm not going to go over this arbitrary number, 1.5 trillion, 1 point whatever, it obscures all of that, right?
Where are you going to cut, is what you ask.
Yeah, where are you going to cut?
Would you like to cut? Lower?
And
keep the drug prices higher? I mean,
yeah, well, they do. And it's remarkable how, it's so popular, but polls show that like negotiating drug prices is popular among Republicans, or popular among independents, and people, members of the political establishment get very defensive when you point out, oh, these people who are opposed to these wildly popular and also common sense measures like allowing the government to negotiate with drug companies are, getting tons of contributions from the drug companies, right? Yeah. And you have, I was watching a segment. I don't watch a lot of cable TV, but I was watching this segment on, I think it was MSNBC. They had Heidi Sieck, and one of the guests suggested that, we should look at Joe Manchin's contributions. And Sieck became incensed. She was so offended. She said, how dare you suggest this? As if incentives only work for, working people or
children.
Or children. Incentives don't work for politicians somehow, right? It's madness. But I just want to get back, and I know I don't want to go too long with this because I'm like Bernie. I will blather about this for a long time. But getting back to the media picture, when you point this out, mainstream journalists get incredibly defensive and they put their hackles up. And when you get bad faith criticism from the right, and let's be clear, the right has stopped talking about media bias and shifted to fake news. They're accusing the legacy media of inventing stories out of whole cloth. It's no longer bias, which is a subconscious process. And those criticisms, they take very, very seriously. Mm-hmm. And they're always reaching out and trying to regain trust with the right. What about us? I mean, I don't, the mainstream political press has been pathetic since Joe Biden was elected. And I was not a huge Joe Biden fan in the primaries. As you know, I'm not a Biden
no one was
cultist. Right. But I mean, that guy has not gotten a good headline in 3 months. 3 months.
For all he's doing. I mean, he's doing some good things.
He is absolutely doing some good things. And we've covered that on my podcast. We've tried to just talk about some of the stuff that doesn't get a lot of attention that he's been doing at the agency level in terms of judicial nominees, et cetera, et cetera. And the press he has gotten has been pathetic.
I'm going to go a little out of order to talk about this, because what you're saying kind of brings up what we've been seeing that's been happening at Facebook. And obviously we had the whistleblower at Facebook. I think we have a photo there. Look,
yeah,
thumbs down. Thumbs
graphic.
down. We had our whistleblower speak to the Senate, have her Senate committee hearing this week, where she talked about how complicit Facebook is in driving these extreme narratives on both sides. And it seems like places even like our show, which used to be like surprise information, and places like your podcast, since we're not extremely extremist, we just don't hit the algorithm somehow.
Yeah. I mean, Facebook is it's an insidious influence on our democracy, and not just our democracy, other countries' democracies. And the fundamental problem is that, that's where we talk with our, aunt that we haven't seen for a very long time. It is a conundrum, right? We need Facebook to be responsible, because the bottom line is it provides a very necessary service. Like, I've wanted to just give up my Facebook account for a very long time, but you know what? I have like old high school friends on there I would not know if they were alive or dead if not for Facebook.
I was really mad actually this week, because as I was watching their total disregard for the health and safety of young girls on their Instagram platform. Then, starting to make one for kiddos, like toddler Instagram, whatever. I was just so upset that I really wanted to push that delete button, and I realized they're using my love of people, of
your community, yes,
of my community, extended, super extended, or not, again, to then poison me and them. It's very sickening.
When I've spoken with kind of serious reform advocates, they say that the number one thing that we all should be asking for and demanding is transparency in how the algorithms work. Because there is really no way to understand how you go on there to find some like tips on how to declog a drain, and you end up on some far right wingnut channel, or you end up getting fed recommendations for it brings you down a rabbit hole, and we don't know how that happens exactly. Mm-hmm. It's all proprietary information. It's not available for researchers to say, look, this is why this is happening. This isn't just Facebook, obviously. It's on YouTube and everywhere else.
Yeah, I find that I like to follow extreme weather, because I'm interested in climate change, what's going on across the world. And one of the rabbit holes that I get pushed into is, oh, extreme weather happening. Oh my God, extreme weather and the end of the world and Christianity. Oh my God, Trump. It's not that far of a leap from who care about climate change to Jesus is coming and Trump is him. It's
and if you look, there's the New York Times reporter who covers this, Kevin Roos. He will tweet out the top performing posts on Facebook. And it is routinely like, Ben Shapiro and OAN or whatever it is. It's these far right websites that and their content that somehow end up at the top of the most viewed posts day in and day out. You have conservatives with the chutzpah to claim that these sites are biased against conservatives when they dominate for reasons that aren't clear. And again, this goes back to the kind of opaque algorithms. Most people in this country are not wingnuts. I mean, just according to the polls, if you look at the basic, you can look at partisan identification, you can look at identification of ideological self-identification, very conservative, very liberal, blah, blah, blah. They shouldn't be dominating those posts day in and day out. There's something going on with, again, those algorithms that we can't see.
This has been a great conversation as usual. We haven't even hit half the topics that we planned for, but I did want to talk to you about the debt ceiling and McConnell scurrying back to his lair. Debt
ceiling makes me crazy. Yeah.
How does it not? I mean, it's super fear-mongery the way the mainstream media covers it. And then last night, in case this is the first news you're watching today, last night the Senate passed a bill to allow the debt ceiling to be raised by, I think it was
$480 billion, which will get us through December, like early December. And by the way, the continuing resolution that keeps the government funded also runs out in early December. So what the Republicans have done successfully since Obama was elected in 2008 and took office in 2009 is create these artificial fiscal cliffs of various stripes, right? So if we don't hammer out some sort of deal or do it through reconciliation, which is possible but has its own difficulties, which we can get into if you want to, then the government will shut down and we'll go into default and bring down the global economy on December 3rd. These, default, we've never defaulted, and I think we never will, but there's always the possibility of making like an error in game theory, right? Where you miscalculate what the other side is willing to do and you end up in a default. That's, I guess, a possibility. But it's maddening because it's unconstitutional to default on the public debt in the United States. It violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. The language is very clear. A lot of people are saying like, oh, we should mint this giant coin, $1 trillion coin, or something like that to make the debt limit go away. I've always thought that since it used to be routine to raise the debt limit as Congress created additional national debt through its legislation, that was something that it wasn't controversial, and there was never an attempt to kind of gain concessions in order to keep the U.S. from defaulting on the debt. I think that what I would like to see is Joe Biden just say, look, it is against the Constitution to default on the debt, so I will be instructing Treasury to continue to make payments.
Do you
just blow it off, make it a dead letter law?
Yeah, that would be terrific. And
I mean,
hopefully he'll do that in December.
It's the cleanest, it's the easiest. I don't think he will.
No, I don't think
he has not shown any.
It also doesn't it also it feeds the narrative. I mean, the Republicans are using it to say, look, the Democrats are spending all this money, and the Democrats use it in their PR and their propaganda to say that the Republicans want to tank the government and they're terrible people, which I agree with. But it's a publicity stunt on both sides.
I mean, the reason that McConnell backed off in this particular time, in addition to the fact that he set up another cliff in the beginning of December, was because, this is according to reports, is that they were worried that the pressure on Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to make a carve out of the filibuster would be too great.
I knew it.
If the clock was counting down to default. Yeah.
And then once they do that for this, then, the American people will smell blood in the water. Like, hey, if we can change the filibuster for this, maybe, and win something good for Democrats, maybe we should change the filibuster. And I don't think the Republicans really don't want that to happen. No,
they don't want it. And they don't want, they also don't want any kind of extreme or extraordinary measures that would take this away as a potential hostage, right? They want to keep holding the credit of the United States hostage.
We're speaking with Josh Holland of the podcast We've Got Issues. Josh, the final story that we've been covering here regularly had a bit of a conclusion, a negative conclusion. The environmental justice lawyer, Stephen Donziger, was sentenced to 6 months in prison, even following more than 2 years of house arrest related to the lawsuit that he filed decades ago against the oil giant Chevron. Have you been following this story?
It's funny because when I was in college in 2001, I did a like this case study on this story. So that's how long it's been going on in Ecuador. They've been seeking redress from Chevron, and the abuses, the environmental and human rights abuses that Chevron is, I'll say alleged because I don't want to get fired, but it's pretty clear that they committed these things. Are egregious. So I have been following this for a very long time. The judge, it's difficult to wrap your head around this one. The judge hectored this attorney, this like public interest attorney, Stephen Donziger, compared him to a mule and said that she had to hit him with a 2x4 like a mule to get him to understand that to respect the law. It's just it's an outrageous case, and it's a really good example of how there are two justice systems in this country.
If you're just joining this story, Donziger would not turn over he represented farmers and a group of farmers and indigenous people in Ecuador, as you said, and he wouldn't turn over papers that in his court case the last time.
Yeah.
And he was held in contempt of court by this former corporate lawyer who is the district judge.
That's right.
Now. Former lawyer with investments in Chevron. So it's really disgusting. I thought that maybe after 6 months and he would get out, hopefully, who knows, that this long national nightmare for him is over. But it's really disgusting.
Yeah.
What our justice system has come to.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, this is somewhat tangential, but I'm growing tired of former federal prosecutors constantly predicting that Donald Trump and his cronies will be brought to justice. I want to hope as much as the next person, and I hope I'm wrong in saying this, but there's nothing in my experience of the American criminal justice system to suggest that that's going to happen. And they keep getting our hope up, and I'm just growing annoyed by it.
Josh Holland, what is coming up on the next installment of We've Got Issues?
Juliana, I don't know what's happening next week on this. We've got issues. I'm gonna figure it out over the weekend. And
we've definitely
next week.
Issues.
I'm sorry.
You don't have to. Just go back and listen to last.
But it'll
week.
be good. We're gonna have a great show this week, and I'm gonna pick good music, and you should tune in.
Josh Holland. Follow Josh at Joshua _HOL.
No underscore.
Wait, there's no underscore.
Just Joshua Hall.
Hall. Yes,
H-O-L.
not Joshua Holland. I've tried that one, and that is not you.
Joshua Hall.
Joshua Hall on Twitter. Thank you so much for being here with us, and I'm looking forward to your return next month.
Thanks for having me, Juliana. Looking forward to it.
You're watching act.tv. Coming up next, our interview with Heidi Sieck, co-founder of Vote Pro Choice. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. We're coming up on our interview section. Heidi Sieck, co-founder of Vote Pro Choice, is joining us today. Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Hi, Juliana. I'm doing great, but once again, we're talking about a subject that we wish we weren't.
Yes. I mean, there's some slight good news. Texas's near total abortion ban has been temporarily blocked after that U.S. federal judge ruled that it violated the constitutional right to abortion in the first legal challenge to Senate Bill 8. Talk about the significance of that ruling.
Well, it's been a really tough few months for those of us in reproductive rights and therefore for everyone. So before we dive into the specific details, I want to caveat by saying I'm not an attorney. So the way that I approach these issues is really practical about how it actually impacts people and strategies, how we can continue to expand reproductive freedom. So I want to make that caveat first. So as most folks know, on September 1st, Texas enacted an extreme 6-week abortion ban. And it was a real innovation after 30, 40 years of an overly funded anti-choice minority attempting to find different ways to chip away at access to abortion directly. So this Texas law went into effect September 1st, signed into law by Greg Abbott, who is up for re-election next year. So vote for his opponent, please. So the Texas law goes into effect. And what it does is it essentially bans abortion at 6 weeks, basically 2 weeks after you miss a period. And it allows for any person anywhere in the United States to file a lawsuit against whoever is helping someone get an abortion or providing an abortion. So your doctor, your nurse practitioner, your Uber driver could be sued. So
the enforcement to private citizens and not prosecutors seems to be a turning over of what we know of as justice in this country.
That is the innovation. So even bigger picture, what I want folks to keep in mind is Roe v. Wade is the constitutional protection of abortion. It is a basic floor to access. And what it says is that abortion cannot be restricted in the first trimester, which is 0 to 13 weeks. Some states can put some restrictions, health safety restrictions during the second trimester, which is 14 to 26 weeks. And then the third trimester is states can prohibit abortions directly. That's 27 to 40 weeks. So what we're dealing with is direct 6-week abortion ban in the first trimester, which is obviously egregiously against the protections of Roe. So that's what SB 8 did. Terrifyingly, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the level of the court right before you get to the Supreme Court, allowed this ban to stay in effect. And that's unprecedented because the other district courts across the country, when these abortion bans came up during the Trump administration and before, overturned it because on its face, it clearly goes against the first trimester protections of Roe. Obviously, 0 to 13 weeks, no restrictions. This is a 6-week abortion ban. But this Fifth Circuit allowed this 6-week abortion ban to stay in place. Unprecedented. So it goes to the Supreme Court for review, and the Supreme Court, in what they're called the shadow docket, says, oh, we're not going to deal with this as a procedural issue. We'll take it up later once it flows through the regular circuit court experience, right? And so that means that the law was allowed to go into effect. And abortion was stopped in Texas for a month. It's been that way for a month. So you're hearing stories of pregnant people who are traveling all across the country to get access. Abortion clinics have shut down. They've stopped providing services after 6 weeks. And it's just horrible. It is a horrible situation. So the Biden administration did go ahead and sue Texas, saying they based their argument on the fact that, hey, this actually federal precedent is protection of abortion through the first trimester. This law clearly on its face is preventing that. And that lawsuit went into effect, I think, September 9th. The Biden administration sued 9 days after the law went into effect. And then last week, on October 6th, actually this week, 2 days ago.
Feels like a week.
Yeah, I know. It's every day. Judge Robert Pittman, who's a federal district court judge in Austin, Texas, he was appointed by Barack Obama, issued a 113-page ruling that sided with the Biden Department of Justice suit and said, this has got to stop. And it actually instructed state court judges and clerks who have the power to enforce this egregious Texas law to stop enforcing it. So that's a win. That's a win. So that's great. However, 2 things. One is that the innovation of this horrible Texas law said that if this law is appealed and it's gone through all the court systems and it is overturned and found to be able to stand, that any abortions that happened during that time, folks could sue for those pregnancies. So if the Texas abortion clinics start providing services now, any pregnancies that are happening now, any abortion care that's happening now, if this suit is overturned or if this ruling is overturned by the Fifth Circuit or the Supreme Court,
Wow.
folks could sue for the pregnancy. So the abortion clinics in Texas are kind of playing a game of like, what do we do? And I'm proud to say that Whole Women's Health of Texas has decided to continue to provide abortion services. It's a mess.
You know, it's an incredible, mind-blowing thing if we take ourselves down to sort of that level of, oh, I'm pregnant. Now I have 2 weeks in which to decide what to do. 2 weeks is certainly not enough if you really want to have enough time to, depending on the situation, what that might be. I mean, when I get told I need a blood test, it takes me 4 weeks to get to Quest.
Totally.
It's just insane. And then these young women, or whatever age women, I mean, you have to be young enough in order to have a kid, young enough women. I'm just trying to put myself in their place. It's like, oh, now I have to check the law and see if I'm going to let me follow what's happening in the federal court. It's not like people are planning on getting pregnant and then having to think about an abortion and then having to check out the court law. And, it just seems very, very stressful on women.
Oh, it's horrible. And again, we should point out, it's not just women, it's non-binary, trans, LGBTQIA people, and everyone who is in community and relationship to that pregnant person. I mean, this is where I feel very strongly about the fact that this issue is not a women's issue. It is not a women's issue. This is an economic justice issue. This is a family issue. I want to remind people that 1 in 4 people who are able to get pregnant have an abortion, and 2/3 of those are already mothers. These are decisions about people's freedom, their economic justice, control over their lives, control over their bodies. I mean, so many stories you hear are about folks that just have economic challenges that they cannot meet or care for another child.
I mean, it's funny to me that this is happening in Texas. There's some irony there. Texas, they want the wall. They've got the border wall. There's the whole immigration crisis. They saying that the U.S. has too many people and we don't want your kids, and they're treating people inhumanely. And at the same time, they're saying, all the kids you want, no abortions. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's one interesting maybe irony is that Roe v. Wade itself is a case that was generated from Jane Roe, who was a woman who got pregnant in Texas and couldn't have access to abortion. So in 1973, Roe v. Wade itself is about a woman not being able to have access to an abortion. And so here we are, full circle, right? And I'm very mindful of that because, again, one of the things that I want folks to really understand is this abortion ban in Texas is not something new. This is just an innovation of an overly funded anti-choice political machine that made a decision in the early 80s that abortion was going to be a thing that could be used to activate a certain group of people to vote with the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. We are a pro-choice nation. And I think you can kind of feel it now with this tech. Men are waking up, folks are waking up for what's really happening. But for the last 50 years, ever since Roe was decided, there's been this political strategy to try to limit reproductive rights access to both activate a certain group of voters, but also because this is a certain perspective of white supremacist political leaders who want to control people. They want to control women. They want to control reproductive rights. They want to control folks. They truly believe that folks should not have reproductive freedom in America.
We've talked about the use of abortion and reproductive rights as a cudgel and as a political tool. Were you surprised that the Supreme Court did not take up this case? Or To me, it seems like the Supreme Court is going to have to put this case off until election time, either when Joe Biden is back up for election. If they're just using it to angry up their base and get voters to come out and basically vote against their own best interests. Your thoughts about what happened with this particular case?
Well, folks are going to come on and say John Roberts would never overturn Roe. It might be true, which makes Brett Kavanaugh the swing vote. So, but I want to go back to 30, 40 years ago. This overly funded anti-choice minority infrastructure included incredible investment in the recruitment and training of conservative justices across the country. So there is an infrastructure that has been cultivating, curating federal justices and judges throughout the country for 40 years. And the culmination of this is a 6-3 Supreme Court with 2 stolen seats on it. And that is why the Supreme Court itself has political manipulation in it. Now, Amy Coney Barrett showing up at the McConnell Institute last month saying, I am going to prove to you that we are not political actors. It's like, okay, gaslight us much, please. But right. The fact is that there is a political bent to the Supreme Court now. Brett Kavanaugh is a political operative. Amy Coney Barrett is clear about her perspectives on abortion rights. And we even have some behind the scenes camera footage from some conservative political conventions. I think it was CPAC, where there's politicians saying, oh yes, Amy Coney Barrett's going to write the opinion to overturn Roe. And we're very happy that she's on the court. So, but this is the long game of the strategy that does not reflect the pro-choice values of this country. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legal scholar in any stretch, but this is what I do know is that there is a case, the Mississippi case, the 15-week abortion ban that's going to be coming up for the Supreme Court. They're going to hear the oral arguments on December 1st. So everyone, please be ready to take to the streets maybe in December 1st. And they are going to really consider a 15-week abortion ban and any limitations on pre-viability restrictions. So this is an direct overturn of precedent of Roe. They could make the decision by June. And that is, yes, it's right before the midterms, but it does totally activate a base. And also, Amy Coney Barrett and the Supreme Court can make the case because all of these egregious abortion bans and all these horrible state laws have been passed over the course of the last 20, 30 years, and it's only gotten worse under the previous presidential administration. The court actually has data to make the case that the country does want restrictions to abortion because this overly funded anti-choice minority has been able to pass all of these laws. So that is it's a cultural case that will give her and that Supreme Court minority enough fodder to be able to write a decision like that. So, maybe that's true. John Roberts will hold steady. Maybe Brett Kavanaugh will be the swing vote, but we know that there's a lot at stake and it's really precarious for us legally.
Well, we've had you on the show before. We always have you on to talk about this, and in your work as the co-founder of Vote Pro Choice, give us that number of people who support a reproductive rights.
This is what I need folks to remember. This is the most important part of this segment, which is we are a pro-choice nation. Over almost 80%, 77% of the people in this country do not want Roe v. Wade overturned and want access to abortion. 77%. Democrats, Republicans, socialists, independents, everybody. And so, of course, I want to caveat that by saying that folks may have nuanced approaches to this issue. They may have certain perspectives of, maybe there should be limitations or whatever. But the bottom line is that folks understand reproductive freedom is personal freedom. It's about economic justice. It's about autonomy. It's critically important. So 77% of us are pro-choice in some respect, at least.
Well, it would be very poetic to just let it end right there. But I did have this other question that I wanted to talk to you about related to this. Back on the 24th of September, the U.S. House made a bid to nullify this Texas
Yes.
abortion bill. They passed a reproductive rights bill that would codify into federal law the right to abortion. It was obviously a very partisan vote, and it's not likely to pass the Senate. Do you think it's important that the Congress act in this way, even though it's not likely to pass?
Well, let's talk about strategy, right? Yes, absolutely. We have to get the Women's Health Protection Act passed. Must. That codifies the protection of Roe into federal law. But Congress has passed it, and the Senate, of course, has stalled. There's an issue of the filibuster. So that's a problem. So again, filibuster reform, important. But here's the thing.
We were just talking about that in the segment before this, that the reason that McConnell decided he would be okay with raising the debt ceiling is because Biden said, well, maybe we'll have to tinker with the filibuster. And I thought maybe once the American public smelled the blood in the water that, if we tinker with the filibuster, we can actually get the programs passed that the majority of Americans would like. And then they would push for that. And
100%. Filibuster reform is extremely important. But the point I want to make, though, is that we are looking in the wrong direction. We're looking at the courts and Congress to solve all our problems on this reproductive rights issue right now. And they're not going to solve our problems. They're not, because we already have all these restrictions all across the country that have been passed for the last 20, 30 years. So the focus has to be in the state houses now. These are elected officials that are making these ridiculous laws that are not reflective of our country. So we have got to start really focusing on states. Like when I was saying at the beginning of this section, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is up for re-election in 2022. We have got to get him out of office. That is critical, because then we can start passing laws in Texas that can protect reproductive freedom and stop this crap. Because all of the things that are going to the courts are state laws. They're state laws. So why don't we start really looking where we can have influence on the policies that are getting made, so we don't have this impact that are happening to the people in Texas right now? Those are things that can happen sooner than filibuster reform or rebalancing of the Supreme Court. And that's that's the whole point of the strategy that we focus on at Vote Pro Choice, is go where the laws are being made. Let's start to have our local and state elected offices reflect the pro-choice nation that we are. Because the fact is, we have not put the amount of investment in that infrastructure, investment in that leadership pipeline that the anti-choice minority has. And now this is the fruition. This is their investment is coming to fruition. Their garden has blossomed now. And the fact is that it's not reflective of the reality of people's lives. And unfortunately, part of their infrastructure includes a significant amount of propaganda that they fill with fake medical services, these fake clinics that they're funding that give lie to people. They actually target even pro-choice progressives to make us think that that the Democrats are egregiously overstepping when it comes to reproductive freedom. And it's all propaganda and lies. And what bothers me a lot is that even the Democratic Party and the progressive community are not often willing to talk about abortion and reproductive rights freely, because they've taken on the shame and the stigma of this issue.
Cory Bush came out and spoke.
Gotta stop.
You saw Cory Bush speak about her own abortion story?
Yes, and Barbara Lee and Representative Jayapal. Yes, the fact is, again, 1 in 4 women have had an abortion, and 2/3 of those are mothers. And that's my story. That's their story. It's the story of all of us.
Heidi Sieck, co-founder of Vote Pro Choice, thank you so much for all the work that you do to help elect pro-choice electeds at every level, including the state level. Thank you so much for being on the program with us. I look forward to it was kind of a win with the federal court, but under such circumstances, it's hard to celebrate.
We have to be hopeful. I mean, we've got to be bold, and we have to be strong, and we have to pay attention to those state and local elections. As I sign off, I do want to remind everyone in 2021, there are 45,000 races on the ballot in 31 states. These are going to be state and local offices. We have to pay attention to those. So as we look toward Congress and the midterms and all of the things that are happening in 22, don't forget about your state legislatures. Run for office, find your representatives, support down ballot pro-choice champion candidates. That is how you have power in your local communities, and you can protect reproductive freedom right where you are.
Heidi Sieck, co-founder of Vote Pro-Choice. Thank you so much for joining us here on actNOW. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
You're watching act.tv. This is actNOW. I'm Julianna Forlano. I hope you enjoyed the show. I love the Friday show when Josh comes on. That's going to be a regular thing. Heidi is always, she's always so great coming on whenever something like this happens. She's always makes herself so available to us, and we always really appreciate that. Don't forget to share and like and comments and whatever. Boost up the algorithm so other people can maybe see some talk that's not going to make you want to jump off a ledge. That's what we hope to do here at actNOW. Again, we are on Wednesdays and Fridays. You can find us all over the place, anywhere you can find act.tv. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.